How you doing, Chip? Right, well, first smoke of the day. I haven't yet decided whether it's going to be a pipe or a cigar. What have I got in here? Monte Cristo A, and then E2. It's been really, really warm the last few days here. And I have been enjoying the cigars, I must be honest. I've had some pipes as well, but the cigars have really been more palatable at the moment. As I mentioned previously, my problem is that I've got so many cigars that I need to do videos on, and they're just sitting here waiting to be smoked. I'm going to have to take a punt on one of them and just smoke them regardless. Romeo and Julieta, 1875. Star. Christ. Flipping mosquito buzzing me around here. I'm going to catch it. I'm going to get it. How you doing, Hardbox? That jar is coming along nicely. That is you, isn't it? Hey, Daniel. Davidoff Yamasa. Yeah, it is pretty punchy. I haven't had the Yamasa for a long time. The one that I had was actually a really small one. Actually, maybe I'll do this as well. Basically, this is the pipe I just bought off Daniel, which he actually bought from me a while back. This is a 2015 pipe of the year from Stanwell, and I need to re-drill it, so I might do that live. We'll see. I thought I'd show you this. This is Woodworking, Practical Woodworking, magazine here in the UK from 1975. 40p it was in 1975. Hey Tony. So this one has a Project Smoker's pipe. So I saw it on eBay, so I thought I'd get it and just see if there's anything interesting there to see. And this is really for a home sort of. It's interesting to see what tools looked like back then. Stanley. This is what a Stanley drill looked like in the 70s. All sorts of innovations to help you with your woodwork. So here is wood turning, a smoker's pipe. So lots of pictures, and fairly similar process to what I do, I guess. So it was just interesting to see that. So for $5.99 I thought it would be just interesting to have a look at that, so I bought it. And yeah, there's actually a lot of things in there which you could use just for stuff which you can make around the house. There's like a home office style unit that you can make for yourself, or various different cabinets which it gives you guides on. with complete sort of exploded diagrams, which are, you know, if you're into that kind of thing, which I'm not. I don't have a setup for woodworking. My setup here is really very specific for pipe making. I was very careful on the outset. You know, it's very easy to get lost in investing in tools, and you could spend thousands and you can make a beautiful big workshop, but actually end up not using the tools. And I had that actually with my drill press. A lot of people use a drill press for drilling pipes, for drilling the bowl and for drilling the air hole. I don't. I use the lathe. So for me, I actually bought a drill press right at the beginning, and I couldn't get on with it, and that has sat in my garage ever since. Doesn't get used. I did at one stage think about using it for pressing my stamps onto the pipes, doing the stamping, the nomenclature, but I haven't done that either. I'm getting buzzed by this flipping mosquito, and it's doing my head in. I was watching, what was it? I was also getting buzzed by mosquitoes. Somebody on the YTPC. So, where was I? Yeah, so you can get lost in machinery, and I decided at the beginning that I'm literally going to grow the workshop as and when I need something, and I'm not going to go out and spend fortunes. There were some basic things which I had to get straight away, so I had to get a lathe. Well, actually not a lathe. I actually only bought a lathe a couple of years into making pipes. I was making perfectly good pipes, maybe not as good as now, but I was making pipes which were selling well without a lathe. So anyway, I certainly needed to get a lathe. I needed to get a disc sander eventually, because I used a drill for everything pretty much. So the drill was my disc sander. Hey Jeremy. So anyway, basic tools. As I say, my workshop is very, very rudimentary, although I've got lathes, so I suppose that's a bit of a luxury, but I use the old lathe for buffing, as a buffing station, which I think a lot of people do. Once they kind of really decide that they're going to be making pipes in a more serious way, they end up getting a bigger and better lathe, and they use the old one for secondary services like buffing. Obviously a bandsaw you need, but I guess some people get away without a bandsaw. It just means a lot more sanding. Actually just changed the blade on it last week. What a difference a new blade makes, obviously. And the shaping wheel, obviously. I mean, that's about it for my machinery. That's the whole shebang. I do have a grinder for sharpening my tools, and that's about it. The rest of the money you spend on tools and on materials. I just recorded a video for my last two pipes that I've made. This is was commissioned 626 with a longer stem spigot. I'll be uploading the video soon. And this is a Jekyll and Hyde bent billiard with ivorite. Got really nice grain. So there's a video going up shortly with those pipes. I haven't actually had Jack. Hello, Phil. I haven't actually worked out how many times a year I change the blade, but when I get to a point where it's so blunt that I'm almost not cutting, that's when I change it. So, and then when I change it and I get this beautiful silky smooth, like going through butter with a hot knife sort of, and I think to myself, why did I battle so long for the sake of a few quid of another blade? You know, you just wait until it really wears out, but for the last couple of weeks it's just horrible to use. I think the main reason that I push it off is because I can't be bothered changing the blade, because it sometimes it goes on very, very smoothly, and sometimes it just takes forever to get it right, and you got to reset all the guides and all of that kind of thing. So that's probably the reason why I don't change it as often as I should. I don't know if anybody knows this cigar. This is Romeo and Juliet 1875 star-crossed. I'm going to have a quick search and see if this in any way differs to the real, the 1875 Real Reserva, and whether I should be holding it back for a review. Star crust Cigar. A medium-bodied premium, that's a must-try. It's made by Altadis, one of the best cigars since the beginning of time, really. If you haven't tried the Starcross, you're missing out. Order a box online. Yeah. See, that's why I look them up and I think, no, I've got to do a video. If I re-drill this down, well, it will probably be to 4.5 mil. But I'm not sure that I'm going to do it now. We'll see. Because I'm going to have to straighten out this stem, and there's always the risk when you re-drill it that you can crack the stem, which I don't want to do, obviously. Right, where's my torch? Let me see what the actual diameter looks like at the moment. Well, you won't be able to see anything. It's just going to look exactly the same. It's just going to have a wider drill. So the drill at the moment, I would say, is about 2.5 mil, which is just not wide enough, really. .63. 4.5, 4.8. Yeah, so over up here, it's not really an issue. But as I get down here, it's 4.9, 4.8. Drilling at 4. Well, I'll use the taper drill bit and then fan it out, and you know I'll do the. I'll open it up, but yeah. Hey, 45. 3.49. 3.5. Yeah, it's a bit risky, to be honest. It is a little bit risky for me to do this, because this stem does feel quite thin, but you can also feel the resistance in there. But it is really very narrow. Yeah, I mean that's what this is, and this is even smaller than that. This starts out at 3.48 mil. This is what I use for my stems anyway, and it starts to taper around here. That's 2.5, 2.6, and right at the end it's like just over 1 mil. It's 1.6, 1.5, and obviously it goes right down to nothing. And usually what I do is I stop short about there. And to lift the camera up a bit. So usually when I'm drilling, hey McPhil, Terry, how you doing? I would usually stop short about half an inch away, something like that. So there's no danger. But here, let's have a look. 0.5. It's not going to do an awful lot, but what I might do is just take it about halfway up and then just use the side cutting file to do the rest. That's going to need a video. Don't know which one this is. It's not the Maduro. All right. I've done a video on this one 6 years ago, so I can smoke it. Fine. So I use a flexor file. I use one of these, which is a side cutting file, which does get bent out of shape. I got this in America, courtesy of a friend. I actually got him to buy a few of them because they do break after a while. You can buy just the file itself without the handle, and you can just put it into a handle yourself. It's just convenient. They don't cost much. They're, I don't know, maybe $7, $8, $9, $10. I don't remember how much it is. It's the convenience of it being done with a handle. You can see on the foot, you got the darker tobacco in the middle, so hopefully that will smoke well. It's a little bit over to that side. We'll see how that goes. Hi Patrick. Would it be faster to make a new stem? Well, the problem with that is that you have to make the stem match up with the shank, which means that you're going to end up sanding the shank, which I don't want to do. This is a pipe of the year from Stanwell. I don't want to mess that up. I have to retouch it up and all of that kind of thing. I mean, I've done that with pipes plenty of times, but not with I don't want to do that with a pipe of the year. And plus, you've got this nice bit of wood on the stem, which I don't want to lose out from. So I'd rather keep it original. You know, if at any time I want to resell it again, you know, it's got to stay original, and it'll smoke a lot better once it's re-drilled, that's for sure. in the bowl, the drilling looks fine. I'll do this bit first and see if it improves it enough so that I can get away with not drilling it. So I'm just giving it a good soaking with alcohol. Just making sure there's no bits of plastic in there and just cleaning out any old tobacco that might still be in there. See, there's still quite a bit of grime in there. People sometimes forget the tenon, and that's often got lots of residue in there when it's a 9mm. Hey Jeffrey. So whenever you get an estate pipe, this is something you can do if you want to. Just give it a good old clean. you know, when you buy, on this particular occasion I know who I've bought it from, so I'm not too bothered, but when you buy things off eBay, oftentimes things, you know, they look beautiful and polished and clean, but once you start cleaning them out inside, they're just completely caked and pretty gross inside. The drawer is a bit easier. What I'm going to do is actually drill it without bending it, because I can drill quite a way without worrying about bending it. And I'm hoping that will be enough to resolve the drawer issues. See, but you've got to be really careful, because once it starts to curve, then what you're doing is, even if you don't pierce the stem, but you're still going straight, and you're creating a groove, and that's going to mean that you don't get a smooth draw. You really don't want to go any further than where it's absolutely straight, which in this case is not very far at all. So I'm really just doing the beginning of the draw of the draft hole. Well, the drill in the stem. It's not the draft hole, is it? That's too far. Alright, that's safe enough. Alright, let's hope I don't do anything wrong here. If not, I'll have to make a new. Yeah, you see, look, it's already up to that. I'm not going to be gaining anything by doing what I'm doing now. What I've done is widened the opening a little bit. It's not even widening it. So to really improve it, I'll have to straighten out the stem. We'll see if that's going to be necessary or not. Let's put a filter in. It's not going to be necessary. So I'm going to sanitize the rest of the pipe, and then perhaps we'll give it a smoke tomorrow. Just make sure that the alcohol completely evaporates. So cleaning out the bowl is really not going to help you at all, because the bowl gets incinerated anyway when you put the tobacco in, unless you're particularly trying to do a deep clean, you know, maybe get rid of some flavors that are in the bowl already. But a little swab with alcohol is not really going to do anything unless you do a proper full salt treatment. So for a mortise, that's pretty clean. Important thing is, don't put the stem straight back in, because when you've put the alcohol in there, it swells a little bit, and it makes it tighter, so you could end up cracking the shank. So you got to let it dry fully. Even though it's alcohol, it dries very quickly, but you still, because it's inside, you know, so it's not exposed out to the elements as much, so it takes a little bit longer to evaporate. So just don't put the stem back in whenever you've done that. I'm just going to clean out the draft hole a little bit. Again, pretty clean. A little bit of dirt coming through. You can use wire brushes. You can buy specific wire brushes for this as well, which, if you've got a really gunked up mortise and draft hole, then that's a good idea. Another way you can do it, but I wouldn't advise you to do it unless you're confident doing it, is to do it with a drill bit. That is actually pretty black. So you take a drill bit, and if you know, don't go any wider than the draft would originally have been, but it just gets gunked up with tar, so the draft hole gets narrower, and all you're doing, it's like unclogging arteries. And if you put the original diameter drill bit in there, then it will just remove sort of that build-up of tar. Hey, Andrew. Okay, that's going to do. I'm going to leave that to dry now. Maybe I'll give the bowl a little bit of a clean because I can see that there's some. So when you're cleaning a bowl, you just got to be careful that you don't get it on the outside, because that will strip away the finish on the rim if the alcohol gets onto the outside. And you don't want to do that if you can avoid it. Alright, I think that's going to be good to go. Set that aside and let it dry, and that should be good to go from tomorrow onwards. Alright, let's get this Perdomo 20th anniversary lit. So the last time I've had one of these is years. The first one I had was 6 years ago when I did the video first time. I don't recall my findings at the time, so let's see how this goes. Last cigar I had, I did the crown cut. I'm going to do that again. So crown cut is using a V cutter. So there you have the crown cut, so called because it looks like a crown. And what that does is it gives you a lot. There you go. It basically means that you get plenty of throughput on the cigar. I received this the other day. This is this particular watch is a mod, so it's a customized watch. It's got a Seiko movement, and it's made to look like the Captain Willard model from the 1970s. It's a Seiko, and nowadays they sell for, the original ones sell for stupid money, like £1,200 for a regular Seiko automatic. But it's obviously, it's a sort of a turtle sort of style Seiko diver's watch. Anyway, I searched for the original band. This band actually works very, very well with it. But I searched for an original band and I found one. You can buy them new for about $90, $100, something like that. I found this one and I got it. I sent him an offer and I got it for about 45 quid, something like that. So I'm going to put that on and see what it looks like. But I've got a feeling that this one actually looks better. We shall see. Come on, mosquito, I'll burn you. Seriously doing my head in. Where are you? Exterminato. Stay out of my way. H up on Mag 54 was, I think, my last smoke. Nick Trapani, a question on blending. If you were going to add stoved Virginia to a Virginia blend to smooth it out, what percentage of the stoved would be a good starting point? I would say 30 to 40%. But 30%, try and see how you get on. It depends how much it needs smoothing, I guess. You could start from 10%, 20%. It's entirely up to you. Experiment. You know, that's the enjoyment of it all. Take your time, experiment, and see what tastes the best. But if you want an immediate result, I guess something like that, 30%, 35%. See 45. But whenever you're mixing two tobaccos, it's a good idea, once you've done that, to just let it sit for a while. Hey Sam. So in case any of you missed my video on Friday or Thursday, my pipes are now on GQ Tobaccos. He uploaded 7 pipes and I was very happy to see 3 of them have sold. So that's nice. I'm very pleased about that. I was worried that you'd put out the pipes and they wouldn't sell. You know, I think we're all our own biggest critics, you know, and you get nervous about these kind of things. You hope that they're going to sell well. No advertising on my channel. but it's nice and refreshing. Probably not good for me, but sour cherry. My wife bought them for the kids mainly, but she gave me permission to have one. That's very nice of her. You can't predict it. You just can't predict. You're right, Phil. I've said that for a long time now. It's impossible. What I can predict is one thing. When you've built yourself a bit of a reputation around a certain price point, let's say, for argument's sake, you're selling pipes for £200 on average. If you put a pipe up for £100, they will sell straight away. So people think, that if a price point is a certain amount and they're getting a reduction, it will sell. Generally speaking. And the way he priced them quite interestingly. The cauldron, which I thought would have sold when I had it, and it didn't, but he put it up and it sold straight away. So okay, he may have a bigger, certainly a different exposure. He's probably got people all around the world looking at the website, a diverse range of people. I think he sells to the Far East quite a bit as well. Whereas my main exposure is YouTube based. YouTube, Instagram. The website itself, my own website, is actually doing very, very well. I've got a lot of people registering on the website. So that's good. I still haven't kind of worked out how to do newsletters and things like that. I do need to do that, but truth be told, if people look at the website regularly, they'll see the new pipes on there. But and GQ is going to be sending out a newsletter with my pipes, I think at the beginning of next month. He does it on a monthly basis, so he may not have any pipes left by then. That would be a great position to be in, so I'll have to send them some more. He does have some of my early pipes, which I sold him 3 or 4 years ago, and he never got around to uploading them, so he'll probably put those on soon as well. They're not quite the same sort of standard from 3-4 years ago, so you'll be able to tell the difference. The stamping is different as well. I hadn't had my LCS Briars stamp made at that stage, so I was using the digits, just the LCS, the individual punch digits that you can buy. But if you want to get an early LCS, probably at a better price, I should imagine, then he'll probably be uploading those soon. I got these Perdomos in I think it was a 5 cigar set, a 5 cigar sort of packet. At the moment it's very smooth, very creamy, not a huge amount of flavour. But it's very light, very creamy, so that's nice. Oh, nice, Phil. Pipes from the 200 series. Okay. Cool. Have you got that tattooed on you as well, Phil? Anchor is just like a standard sailorman's tattoo, isn't it? And my stamps are made by Buckeye Engraving. No longer responding. Yeah, I mean, he took a while. He's very, very busy. He took a while when I was doing them. But I might revise my stamping at some point, because I do find that I have to really talk to somebody who knows about stamping. Maybe I'll get back in touch with him. Razor cut pull, nice. Square shank pipe, and a platter top stubby Rhodesian, nice. Let's see what the website says. Well, the website looks pretty much still up and running. The only thing I found with my stamps is that I don't. It's just probably the way I'm doing it. But so there's my LCS stamp, and I find that if I press it with a reasonable amount of force, I'll get an impression, but it's very light. And if I press it harder to get a deeper impression, then you tend to get this sort of outline, the steel outline, and makes an impression as well. So to me, I would say that the actual impressions need to be deeper, so that you can push down with quite a bit of force, get a nice deep impression without getting the steel outline. That's what I would like, and I have that with pretty much all the stamps, the same problem. But so it's about finding the right kind of amount of force to use. And with pipes as well, a lot of the time the surfaces that you're stamping on are curved. You know, if you're going around a shank or something like that. That's why I tend to, a lot of the time, do it on the base of the pipe. When you're doing it curved, then you've got to do the impression and turn it at the same time. So you've got to try and keep the amount of pressure level. And it doesn't always work. Hitting it with a mallet is just not the way to go, because number one, you don't know how hard. It's much harder to do and you can't keep it still. So what happens is, you find that it bounces and you end up getting a shadow, like it's not a very clear impression. What a lot of people do, the factories, is they rig up on a drill press. They have a rig on a drill press, and they have a thing that the pipe sits on, which rotates. So you put the drill press down and you rotate the pipe at the same time, and it kind of gives a good impression, but I haven't got that kind of thing. Yeah, so these ones can be used for a press or a handle. I haven't worked out how to actually remove it from the handle, but they are officially removable. Probably I'll have to put it into some kind of vise, I'd imagine, but they officially are removable. They're not glued in or anything. So I'm told. Did somebody say Tree? Oh, Tree. How you doing, man? We missed you on when were we last? Was it on Wednesday or Sunday? I'm not sure if I was on Wednesday. No, I had a wedding on Wednesday, so Sunday I missed you. How you doing? Been a bit rough, eh? So you on a break now till Wednesday, Tree? Till Monday, I mean. Well, sleep. Sleep is the best thing, if you can. Hey John, how you doing? Anyway, going back to what we were talking about before about pipes and predicting the market. I have talked about doing a cheaper range of pipes, which I still need to get around to. You know, to try and sell pipes around 140, 150 pounds. So I might still push on that. And I guess there are different markets, you know. I think most people are much more comfortable spending between 100 and 150 pounds rather than spending 250 pounds. 250 pounds is you know, approaching $300. That's a big sort of milestone price point. So if we're here spending between 100 and 150 pounds, I guess in America it's 150 to $200. I think is most people's comfortable price point. So I've got to try and well, the seconds. Hi, Robert. The seconds, I do those cheaper anyway. Oh, he's home. Congratulations, Tree. Fantastic. When did he get home? When did he come? And how's he doing? He settled in okay? So the seconds, it's really they're usually, you know, pipes that I've made to the usual sort of grade, but for one reason or another I've graded it a second. So for instance, I might make a pipe and maybe the drill is a bit off, it's not quite central, although I personally don't have a problem with it because I find that they smoke very well, but still the accepted correct way to drill it is dead center. So I can't really sell it as a first, so that it might be a £200 pipe and I'll sell it for 160, 150, 180, depending on what the original price would have been had it not been drilled off. But I'm talking about a lower range where they're not seconds, they're just the cheaper range. So that's something I want to develop and work out a way that I can do those pipes really quickly so that it's not costing me. You know, if I spend on average, I would say if I timed myself, I mean, I sort of stagger things sometimes, but if I, on average, I spend probably between 4 and 6 hours on a pipe. If I was to do it continuously, non-stop, I can push out a pipe much quicker than that. But depending on what I'm doing and depending on the complexity of the pipe. Yeah, so 100%. So preformed, but it's also about the complexity of the pipe, and it's also about the finish. So I might use preformed stems on a 4-star pipe. It's very possible I could have a 4-star pipe which has got a preformed stem. To me, the price might be affected by whether it's preformed or hand cut, but the grading is not affected by that, because first of all, the preformed stems that I use are very, very good, and by the time I'm finished adjusting them, they're as good, if not better, than any hand cut pipe, any hand cut stem. So I don't allow the fact that it's a pre-stemmed or hand cut to affect the grading. It could affect the pricing simply because of the time that I've spent if I do a hand cut stem, and hand cut stems tend to be Cumberland's more expensive material to start with. So generally speaking, if I'm hand cutting, it'll usually be a bit more money, not a huge amount, but certainly preformed with a tenon fitted, that kind of thing I could see being yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you, Phil. That's something that I've found, and I know it's probably taboo to say it, but it's true. Preformed stems are great. Nowadays, the standard of the quality that they churn out are fantastic. Yeah, so Tom Eltang's basic pipes, or his Sarah Eltang range, those are made with preformed stems, I think. They'll have been adjusted, like any decent pipe maker is going to adjust the preformed stem. Yeah, so the Italian ebonite ones, those ones, you can see that they're made on some kind of stamping machine, and they're, as you say, they're better than they used to be, but those need quite a lot of work to get them right. And I've kind of, although I still use them from time to time, but I don't use them as much. And yeah, the Guidici ones. But I tend to, when I'm doing preformed, I tend to stick to acrylic most of the time. Hey Syed, falling asleep is always a good thing, because you've stolen a little bit of extra sleep, and so you feel refreshed. This time next week is the awards, isn't it? What's the date today? 18th. This time next week is the YTPC awards. Phil is sleep talking right now. Sorry, sleep typing. We're just almost an inch in. It's quite slow smoking, actually. Nightcap in a Perlux. Never heard of that brand tree. Cliff is doing, he's doing a pipe, is it Pipe Week next week? No, this coming week. When is Pipe Week? Starts on Monday, I thought so. So I think Cliff is featuring different pipe makers each day of the week. So he's doing, I think he's doing a few different pipe makers, and I believe I'm one of them that he's doing. Cliff does amazing videos. He's very entertaining. Definitely worth watching. His channel is Pipe Ninja, in case you haven't subscribed. It's a relatively new channel. So he had the channel previously, which he had a lot more subscribers, but it's a relatively new channel. And he probably would have been one of my nominations. I didn't realize he was under 500. But because it's a new channel, he was around the 500 mark. But Cliff is just a funny guy. And you don't want to mess with him anyway, because he uses drills in places that I don't use them. As soon as you ash a cigar, it looks a lot shorter. As obvious as that may sound. I remember these being a lot more chocolatey. I might be wrong, but I have to look back at my first video from 6 years ago and see. Criswell pipes, 2 unsmoked numbers clippers from 50 to 60s in a box with paperwork. Thought it would be fun to look at the history and show pipes. Yeah, for sure. That would be nice. New old stock. Nice. It's always amazing to get new old stock pipes, because you know that the briar is completely cured over the years. There are a lot of pipe makers who I'm not sure if Beau Nord used to do this or not. I'm not sure, but some, if you've got the luxury of time, then you could do this. But most pipe makers, especially artisan pipe makers, don't have the time for that. And they make a pipe, they need to sell it to get the income. But I think there are some pipe makers who would drill the pipes and then leave them on the shelf. So when you drill the pipe, you've got the chamber drilled out, and you've got the draft hole drilled out, and then they would set it aside. So you'd have a block like that, maybe the rough shape cut out, and then they would drill and then set it aside. And that was because it's drilled out, so the air gets through the pipe, inside the pipe, and it allows it to dry a lot better. Because however much you leave this to dry, it's a solid block. Take out the middle chunk of it, and it's just got the thin walls that need to dry out, and it's got airflow in between. So I think Beau Nord used to do that. I mean, to order a pipe off him used to take, you could wait 2 or 3 years for a pipe. And I think that's what some people used to do. If you've got the time to do it, the luxury of time, that you're not relying on every pipe for income, then that would be a great thing to do. Again, that's probably something I ought to do. So it doesn't take, so even if I'm working on a commission, at the same time while I'm doing that, I could take another block and drill it and set it aside, and do that every day, just one block, drill it and set it aside, and then by the time you get around to them, they'll have aired out even more. The problem with that is that you don't always know what shape pipe you want to do. So again, somebody like Beau Nord, when he had, I don't know what his financial situation was, but when you're looking at a block, for him, when he read the grain, to him, that block had to be used for a specific shape. So maybe he would drill it out and then wait till somebody ordered it, or he would just do it when it was ready. I don't know how that works, but it's certainly something which is worth considering. Maybe I'll do a few like that. And you have to have a good stock of briar to do that. My current stock at the moment, what have I got there? Maybe I've got 50 or 60 blocks up in the cupboard, and then I've got probably in boxes, I've probably got maybe 100 blocks in boxes elsewhere around the house, something like that, if I'm lucky. So I don't have a huge stock. so I couldn't afford to do too many like that. I get you, Andrew. Yeah, I mean, you could do that, but I'm not at the point where I'm reading briar to that extent. You know, most of the pipes that I do, especially commissions, they will be billiard derivatives. So I tend to keep the big blocks, the big sort of plateau blocks, for more creative pipes. But the Ebershorns generally will tend to be fairly classic shapes, just my style, but classic shapes. So there probably wouldn't be too much deviation from that a lot of the time. This one is still available. It's keenly priced, so that's probably why it hasn't sold yet. I might offer it up to GQ Tobaccos if they're interested. Might have more exposure that way. Really nice pipe. Well, if you want a partner for yours, John, hit me up. We'll work something out if you want. Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky here in the UK. You know, the humidity levels are really good. I mean, you could have your cigar humidor. Just, you know, you put the Bermuda packs in a humidor. It takes a long time for them to dry out. We're very lucky that way. Our humidity levels are quite stable. The guy who worked in JJ Fox's, Philip Shervington, he's been in the trade for like 60, 70 years. He's a man in his 80s probably, and he had his own shop called Shervington's originally, and then he worked. That's a Ramses. It's a take on a Ramses. It's not religiously following the Ramses shape, but it's a take on the Ramses. If you have a look at B-Dog's channel, he's got a Ramses that I've made, which is much more faithful to the original Ramses shape. New cigar shops in London, they do have some popping up every so often. I think Cigars have opened a new branch. They've definitely opened one recently in St James's, but I think they've opened another one in London somewhere. I saw a post somewhere about it. But I've got to be honest with you, I just don't really go anymore, because I don't venture out that much because I'm based here now. I used to go out every morning because I used to have that morning drive, which I don't have anymore, and so I don't get the excuse to get into town. So if I go to town, I'm usually going for a specific reason. Either it's to meet somebody there, or if somebody's from overseas, I'll definitely meet them if they hit me up. Occasionally I'll meet some guys from the Pipe Club of London, because the Pipe Club of London doesn't meet there anymore officially. So, but I don't go too often. Mario Grandi. I had a Mario Grandi right at the beginning when I was first buying pipes, and the one I had was like a doorstopper, a huge pipe. I thought it was beautiful, but it took me forever to sell it. I think I put it on eBay originally. Maybe it was on one of my videos, I don't recall. But I think if I had that pipe, if I'd still have it now, I'd probably keep it, convert it to 9mm. Yeah, we see, Phil, you guys, you could have miles between one house and another. You got so much space over there. Chat out the ER docs. So for you, it really is just the gas stations or the grocery stores. I have a guy, a dog walker, who walks past my house every single day, 2 or 3 times a day. And he actually gave me a cigar recently. He smokes cigars. And occasionally, interesting fellow. I think he may have been seen in one of my morning videos, I'm not sure. He had some connection with boxing, I don't remember what it was. I think I've mentioned that before. But there's still a lot of smokers out there, you just don't see them. You know, they just don't do it in public. Yeah, Andrew, funnily enough, I noticed that recently as well. When I'm on lives using my phone, that heart emoji is a pain in the neck. John, a good question. She has said nothing about it. I don't know what's going on. Either she doesn't care anymore, or she's got a bloke on the side. I don't know, but she doesn't seem to care anymore. But it's looking nice, it's trim, and just getting longer. Hey, Chad. I'll probably just get fed up with it myself and trim it back, but I've been wanting to grow it out for a while now. And there is a period in the year where we're not allowed to cut our hair, and for about 4 weeks, something like that. So it's a good starting point, and each year I kind of let it go after that until my wife badgers me to cut it, but so far she hasn't. It's around the Passover time, so from Passover for about 4 weeks on, we're not supposed to cut our hair. So I don't use a razor. I'm not allowed to use a razor. It's biblically prohibited using a razor. So I only use a beard trimmer and a shaver. I think all it means is that you give me a heart. Is that right? Is that it's like giving me a like, I think. And you press the heart button. You're going to be on tomorrow, Chad? Sorry, not Chad. Tree. Well, if you have a shaver, so that's my shaver, and it has another head for trimming your moustache and your beard. So if you have a look, you've got the teeth there, and the same thing with that. You got the hairs go through those, and so essentially there is a blade in there, but that doesn't actually touch your face. What it does is it pulls your hair into the machine and trims it inside the machine. The biblical prohibition is you must not use a razor on your face, on your beard, essentially, because the razor, although we don't know the reasons for all of the biblical statutes, sometimes there are reasons which we understand and sometimes not. But I believe, I'm no scholar, but I believe the reason why we don't use a razor is because when you use a razor, it actually shaves your skin as well. So it's actually destroying part of your body. And we are not allowed to do anything to our bodies, to obviously aside for medically, but so shaving your head you can. So you can shave your neck, the back of your neck with a razor. It's only the beard. So it's from sort of up here all the way around to up here. So from next to your ears all the way down here, all the way up, and then on your face and your moustache. You cannot use a razor. So I don't know why it's just on the face. There is certainly some esoteric sort of spiritual reason for the beard having some certain level of holiness in the beard. That's part of our tradition. It's you know, for people who are not religious, or you know, it would sound odd, but there is Kabbalistically, certainly there is again, it might sound odd to people, but basically traditionally, through the Kabbalistic belief, there is a certain level of God's mercy resides in the beard. I can't explain that to you, but that's what there is a tradition in that. So a lot of people keep a beard even if it's trimmed. A lot of people don't ever cut their hair, their beard hair. So my oldest son, who lives in Israel, he has never, I mean, he might sort of, if a stray hair, he might sort of trim that, but I don't believe he's ever cut his beard, ever cut his hair on his face. His head, yes, but not on his face. So a razor you can't use because there is a certain level of destruction of the body when you do that. It's the same reason why we're not allowed to tattoo. Orthodox Jews will not have a tattoo, because when you're using the tattoo pen, you're sort of destroying the skin because you're getting it underneath the skin. There's two things. There's that, and there's also because you're kind of idolizing your own body by doing that. So that's also, I think, part of the reason. Again, I'm not a scholar, so I can't really say precisely what the reasons are. What's really, really interesting is that when you have, I don't know if you guys have heard of Lubavitch. It is a Jewish sect which does a lot of outreach work. So they're not evangelistic in terms of converting non-Jews to being Jews, but they do go out and seek Jews who have sort of lost their way and try to bring them back into the fold, assuming they want to. I mean, I'm not talking about a cult or anything like that. It's all completely done in the nicest possible way. So they go out and they bring people back into the fold. And what's really, really interesting is, you know, we put on the leather straps in the morning when we pray, the phylacteries. So sometimes when you go into a synagogue and you'll see a guy roll up his sleeve and he's got a full arm, and that's so unusual because people will think, well, what the heck has he got a tattooed arm for? But what they have to realize is that this is a guy who's come back to the fold and he's obviously got tattoos, and that's fine. It's about, you know, just tolerance. Good question, Phil. I don't know. If removing them would probably be done medically, in that case, I don't know. You'd have to ask a rabbi. I honestly don't know the answer to that. Yeah, so Lubavitch is very, very big in New York City. I mean, they're all over the world. You guys may remember the tragedy which happened in India. It was in Mumbai, where the terrorists raided the Lubavitch house and killed. It was a terrible, terrible story. I don't know how long ago it happened, maybe 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago. Actually, the boy who survived had his bar mitzvah a few years back. So it must be maybe somewhere between 17, 18 years ago, something like that. But it was a shocking story. They stormed. At that same time, they also went into a shopping center and killed a load of people. It was kind of a multi-pronged attack. But one of the things they did is they took over the Lubavitch house, Chabad house as it's known. They're all over the world, but this one was in Mumbai. And the rabbi and his wife were there with their young son. The wife was pregnant, highly pregnant, and they had a young son who was 2, I think, at the time, and like a babysitter, a helper in the house. And there was a stage where they were holding them hostage, and at one stage you saw, the prayer shawl, a talit. You saw a prayer shawl in the window of the apartment, which presumably it was a call for help or something like that. But it was an absolutely shocking story. But they were discovered later, both of them killed, and apparently unspeakable things which had happened to the mother and her unborn child. But the nanny managed to escape with this 2-year-old. And this 2-year-old actually celebrated his bar mitzvah a few years ago. It was a huge celebration. They made an absolutely massive event to celebrate it because his whole life had been torn apart, his whole family killed. So they made a huge fuss about it, and it was a beautiful event. In America it took place. Yeah, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson was the Grand Rabbi. He is no longer alive, and there was no successor. So the sect continues without a rabbi, without a head rabbi, without a Grand Rabbi. They have lots of rabbis, but not like a Grand Rabbi. But that story was just absolutely shocking story, especially what they did to the mother with an unborn child. I didn't see anywhere that reported exactly what happened. They just said it was too shocking to. What you did see was they showed pictures afterwards of the apartment, and what you see is a blood-stained bed, basically. That's what you see afterwards. So you can imagine that some terrible things happened there. And you just can't fathom the torture, the torment. You don't want to think about it. Pure evil. Lots of unspeakable things have happened to people throughout the world in history because of their faith or their culture or creed. It's just shocking the evil that people can do, and it's also equally amazing the good things that people can do. Good and evil, yin and yang. It's the tussle that the world grapples with on a daily basis throughout millennia. It's the same as what's going on all over the world, Ukraine being one example. On political levels you see the same thing, just in different ways, but it's always been thus, and I guess the world wouldn't exist if it wasn't like that. If it was pure goodness, then there would be nothing really to live for. If it would be pure evil, there certainly wouldn't be anything to live for. So that's the world. It's the constant struggle of good overcoming evil, and that's what we all strive to do. comes down to free will. You know, we all struggle with the age-old questions of the purpose of life and where we are in the universe and all of that kind of stuff, and creation, God, religion, atheism, agnosticism. You know, these are all questions which everybody deals with throughout their lives, but ultimately it is the struggle of good against evil. Yeah, it is hard to imagine, but you know, if people, I mean, okay, I don't want to get too heavy here, but stop me anytime if you're not happy with what we're talking about. But if you go back to Germany in the 1930s and 40s, a whole nation, well, that's unfair to say a whole nation, but a big percentage of the nation followed what a man said, and they were, you know, the age-old defense, I was following orders. You know, at what point do you say to yourself, I cannot follow this order anymore, you know? And you get to a point where people get sort of brainwashed to the extent that they lose the balance of good judgment. You know, when the Holocaust, which was terrible enough, when that kind of was over, there are so many stories of people going back to their homes in Poland and being slaughtered by their Polish neighbors after the end of the war, because I'm not saying only in Poland, but stories that I've heard of were in Poland, and they were slaughtered when they came back to their homes because they all thought that all the Jews would have been exterminated, and they had taken over the property of their Jewish neighbors. The Jewish neighbors come home, and they survived the war, and yet just came back and then got slaughtered by the neighbors, people that they'd known all their lives. So you ask yourself, at what point? I mean, these people weren't following orders, they were just being greedy, essentially, and they'd kind of accepted the tropes and the things that people had said about Jewish people, which essentially is what Hitler's what's the word? What's the stuff that he put out during the war to make people be bad? Information that he put out, negative information about propaganda, that's the word. So they basically ate the propaganda and accepted it, that at that stage, that in their opinion Jewish people were vermin, were a subspecies. I guess, you know, well, anyway, so once that was all accepted for them, to them it was probably not such a big stretch to then kill them. Yeah, but I mean, you still see atrocities going on around the world all the time, and that maybe not on that level, but it doesn't seem to stop. I was about to make a point and I've forgotten my train of thought now. But certainly one of the benefits of having a long beard is to stroke it. Come on. Is there a feeling like that? Makes you feel wise. I enjoy them too, Phil. These are my favorite conversations, but I'm always wary of starting them because people, you know. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. And what I was saying is about balance. When we look at the world as it is today, it's completely screwed up. So when you've got atrocities which happen in the world, so what's the counter balance against atrocities? It's teaching people tolerance. It's giving people, it's respecting other people's cultures, respecting other people's needs, and especially with minorities. So when you look at the way the world is going now, the world is now the balance, the scales have tipped over so much in the other direction that now it's encroached into the realms of abnormality, and so if you don't have balance, so if you tip the balance where you discriminate people to the extent that it goes to abnormal discrimination, such as the Holocaust, so then you need to tip the balance back to the center. The problem is that the balance has tipped and continue to tip and continue to tip and continue to tip to what we have today, where it's completely imbalanced in the other direction. And that's the problem that we have today. It's not to say that minorities shouldn't be respected. Of course they should. And it doesn't make a difference to me, even if it's something that I don't personally believe in. But what my problem is that when the tail wags the dog, that's where I have a problem. So where you have, and I've given this example many, many times, and it's a very simple example and a very simple analogy. If you go into a shop, a man has 6 fingers. He's born with an abnormality of 6 fingers on his hands. He goes into the shop, into a clothing shop, and says, "Please, can I buy a pair of gloves?" The clerk gives him the pair of gloves, but of course it's only got 5 fingers in it, a thumb and 4 fingers. So he puts his hand in and he says, "But this doesn't fit me. I've got 6 fingers. I want a pair of 6-fingered gloves. Give me a pair of 6-fingered gloves." So the guy says in the shop, "I'm sorry, I can't, because we only do 5-fingered gloves, because the whole world needs 5-fingered gloves. You're an anomaly, and I'd love to give you a pair of gloves, but if you want to order one, I'll have a pair made for you. No problem. No, I want you to stock 6-fingered gloves from now on, and if you don't, I'm going to go to the authorities." And then he goes to the authorities, and the authorities say from now on, every shop has to make 6-fingered gloves. That's the world at the moment. So we can respect the guy with 6 fingers and say, yes, we'll do our best to cater for you, and we'll make you a pair. But when the government says every single shop has to stock 6-fingered gloves, that's the tail wagging the dog, as opposed to the dog being in control. It's the tail, the small end of the dog, actually controlling the whole of the dog. And the world now is that where the tail is wagging the dog. And that is, in a nutshell, my summary of today's situation. I try to think of an analogy which doesn't offend anyone, so it's very rare, I think, to have people with 6 fingers. I'm sure somebody exists with that, but trying to basically find the simplest, and I've used that analogy many times, and it really just explains things in a very simple way, and everybody can understand that. And obviously we're talking about LGBTQ people, and I have no problem respecting people's needs, but not that the whole world has to revolve around the way. So the main thing is where pronouns, that's the classic one which everybody argues about, where you've got, of course, that whole explosion where it hit the news with Jordan Peterson. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says, but on this particular point where he essentially says that he can, if he's talking to a person, and that person, say, is born a man but identifies as a woman and wants to be called she, he said he would have no problem doing that in a conversation to respect that person, but not that it becomes a legal requirement that everybody from now on has to refer to people in various different situations, and you have to know, I don't know how many different pronouns there are nowadays, but or single sex toilets, you know, where, and in sports, I mean, that's gone mad. I can see that there's a backlash now, thankfully. Yeah, I mean, Jordan is certainly sounding a lot more religious than he used to. And he said the way he describes it is that he behaves as if there is a God. So he's not saying that he necessarily believes there's a God, but he behaves in a way that there is a God. In other words, he behaves in a moral way, I think is what he's trying to say. But I haven't really listened to him for quite some time now. I mean, little clips here and there, but I find that it's the same with Ben Shapiro, who's a little bit too far over for me anyway. But even though that he's an Orthodox Jew, but I do find it's a lot of it, because he's running or part of a broadcasting firm, a broadcasting company now. So there's a lot of clickbait and that kind of thing, which once it gets to that point where it's all about, you know, getting people to sign up and pay for memberships and all of that kind of thing, I lose interest, because then it becomes biased. As soon as money gets involved, it's biased. Candace, for instance, when she started off, I enjoyed listening to her, and then it got to the point where she was just ripping into everybody, and again I lost interest. I listened to some of her videos, but not all. One person that I do enjoy listening to, even though he's an atheist, and I actually enjoy listening to atheists, but I find it challenging. What's his name now? He's a very gently spoken guy, an American. I can't remember his name now, but I enjoy watching him because he's a mensch. He's a gentleman when he speaks. He's not trying to rip people up, and he sort of challenges people based on his argument, and that's it, nothing else. Yeah, that's a good argument, Phil. But not everybody. I mean, you've got people who are. My problem is that my brain doesn't work a lot of the time, so I can't remember the names of people. But you've got the English professor, who's a famous atheist. I can't remember his name for the life of me. So I enjoy listening to him, even though I find that he also has become a little bit. I enjoy listening to him because he very, very rarely gets angry. And I enjoy those debates. I enjoy debates which are intellectual debates. I don't enjoy debates which are titled by "this one destroys that one." I get turned off by those. I enjoy an intellectual debate. And ultimately, those debates all come to the same kind of thing. And if you believe, you're going to believe. You know, there are some people who will change their minds possibly, but overall it all comes to the same thing. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Robert. I think that Jordan loses a lot of people because he just, okay, he's a very intelligent man, and he breaks things down very, very well, you know, piecemeal, and you can, if you follow his line of thought, you can understand some great things. But he does tend to extend his sentences too much. You know, he could say things in a much shorter, simpler way, and he says it in a more sort of academic way. And where at the end of the day, his audience are the masses. Most of his audience are not academia, and so you do lose. It gets a little bit long in the tooth, I think, is a good way of saying it. And he can answer his questions in a much shorter way. But in his mind, because he's an academic, he has to break things down so that you get to the source of each of the points he's trying to make as to why he comes to that point. And it takes such a long time sometimes that you've lost the train of thought. Okay, so the one I was talking about was Richard Dawkins. So I enjoy listening to him most of the time. Very occasionally you see him getting irate, but and he can say things which I think are below the belt. But generally speaking, I enjoy listening to him because he has got a lot of patience, and he can be facing some people who are quite brash, but he just breaks it down based on his arguments. Christopher Hitchens I used to enjoy listening to. He's not alive anymore, but I used to enjoy listening to, but then it became very repetitive, and so I went through a period of listening to what he had to say, but then lost interest. But there's an American guy, I'm trying to find his name. Sam Harris, thank you, Chad. There's me searching, but you've got the answer. So Sam Harris, Dawkins is an atheist, yes. He's a raging atheist, I call him. He's an evangelical atheist. So he's pretty religious in his atheism. I think that's a great statement. He's pretty religious in his atheism. He's a fanatical atheist. But Sam Harris, I really enjoy listening to him because he's so calm, and his arguments are very, very believable. But like I said before, if you have faith, you have faith. No arguments are going to make a difference. That's what faith is, There's a religious practice and there's faith. They're two very different things. But one, I guess, leads from the other. But if you didn't have faith, your religious practice would wane pretty quickly, I guess. Although there are many people in the world who have religious practice because they're in a certain culture, or they belong to a certain, what I would call a membership club, and so that's the way you run your life. And I'm sure there's plenty of religious people who are like that. It's well known that there are many, many priests in the Catholic Church who no longer believe in Catholicism. Maybe they believe in God, I don't know, but they don't believe in Catholicism, and but they stay because that's their livelihood, and that's their house, because the priests get a house, and they have no choice, because if they renounced, they'd get booted out. No, he's not lukewarm. I suppose Sam Harris is in danger of being a bit lukewarm, just because of the way he presents. Because he's so calm, some people might say he's a bit boring, but I actually, once you get past that, yeah, I would agree with that, Robert. I think that my personal opinion is that no religion should be evangelical, because ultimately it's live and let live, and let people do what they want to do. As soon as you get evangelical, that's when you end up with atrocities. And the Catholic Church has certainly been guilty of atrocities over millennia. I mean, I can only talk about how the Jewish nation suffered, but Very, very true words, Chad. Even if you don't believe in God, you worship something for sure. It might be money, or it might be atheism, but you worship something. Yeah, you see, I think that when people are evangelical, then they're essentially saying that I'm better than you, and you need to come to my camp, otherwise you're worthless. And that, to me, is the start of where atrocities come from. I'm smoking a cigar, as you can see. I'm smoking a 20th anniversary Perdomo. I agree, Phil. That's why I don't usually start these kind of conversations. If somebody asks me, I'm more than happy to talk about it, but I don't start the conversations because I don't want to be pushing my own faith down people's throats. I don't think it's the sun-grown. I think this is the regular. I mean, it doesn't look shade either. It looks quite dark, and it's not Maduro, but it's the regular one. I don't know which. It doesn't say anything other than 20th anniversary, so I think it's the standard 20th anniversary. I have got the sun-grown ones as well. Actually, I think this is part of a sun-grown range, although it doesn't say it on it. I think the 5-pack that I bought were all sun-grown. I'm not sure. Oh, barrel-aged. I did not notice this. It says barrel-aged on it. I don't know what that means. I'm not tasting anything in particular. You've still got one of these, Tree? I hope you're keeping it humidified. Bourbon barrels, doesn't taste like it. Well, that would probably smoke beautifully now, Tree. It must be so nice and mellow. You've had it for a good while. Yeah, gimmicky, I guess. They've probably got I'm just joking now, but they've probably got a barrel open at both ends on the conveyor belt, and they just slide through the barrel, and then they can say barrel aged. It was in there for a time, so it's aged. I mean, even if it was only 2 seconds. Thank you. Cheers, Phil. I really do enjoy these kind of conversations because I find it benefits me as well. It strengthens my own sort of rationales. But like I say, I prefer somebody asks me a question rather than I start a conversation. I'm always happy to answer questions that I'm able to answer. 5 or 6 years it must be, yeah. I think we've got similar beards, John. B-Dog. I think you've had yours a bit longer than me. In longer terms. I've had a beard since my 20s, but I don't usually grow it out. Were you clean shaven before that, John? I don't remember. I mean, Chad must be very religious and very holy because he's got a beard down to here and tree. Andrew. How long you had your beard, Chad? There's a beard in you somewhere, Andrew, I'm sure. You just have to let it out. Let out the beast. Yeah. Actually, this one is 7 years old. Well, literally from clean shaven to that length, 7 years. Do you trim it and like tidy it up, or you just let it go? Yes, Phil. Andrew's beard is his eyebrows. Okay. Unibrow. You just have to turn him upside down. No trim. Oh dear. 30 years plus. Andrew, you've got the right chin for a beard, I will say that. I reckon if you let yours grow, you'd get a... Especially people who have shaved all their lives, their beard, the initial spurt is very fast. And depending on their general growth, but if they have a decent growth and they've always shaved, then you get a quick growth spurt. I shaved until I was probably about 20, something like that, 19, 20. I was clean shaven, and after that, there was no going back. I don't think I ever fully shaved. I've often shaved very, very close, so there's literally like a stubble, like a 3 or 4 day stubble, but never completely off. I've always felt, maybe because of my size, it hides a little bit of the triple chin, maybe, I don't know. Van Dyke, or like a what do you call those little beards? Brain. A goatee. Is that what you're saying? I think there's a little bit of a delay. I'm just going to refresh my screen. How do Israeli soldiers save for their gas masks? They don't. Well, first of all, I'm sure there's plenty of Israeli soldiers who use a razor because then a lot of them are not religious. But during the Iraq war, when the Scud missiles were raining over Israel and there was a threat of chemical attacks during the Gulf wars, So they issued gas masks to the whole population in Israel, and they had certain ones which could work with beards because there's about, I don't know how many million religious Jews there who have beards. I don't know if it's millions, maybe it's hundreds of thousands, I don't know. Beards. So they had to have, I think, different modified gas masks to work with beards. Yeah, I understand, Phil. It's possible that those gas masks went over the whole face, right under to the chin, to the neckline. I'm not sure. Or they just folded up the beard and used that as a filter. I don't know. Simon's being stupid now. I think this cigar is getting to me, perhaps. Look at that burn line. Nice. Pretty good. Nice white ash. You can see the seam of the leaf there. And you see that line, the way it follows. I like that. Is there an exception for soldiers in the faith? In which respect? On whether they're allowed to have a beard generally. Is there an exception for soldiers? Look, in the scripturally, Orthodox Judaism doesn't take scripture on face value. In other words, of course it takes it on face value, but there's a lot more to it than face value. So you cannot be an Orthodox Jew without following the Talmud, the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a extrapolation of the Bible, of the Torah, and it's the sages from the time of the temple and before and after, and basically generation after generation after generation of the generations leading rabbis interpret the scripture based on the Talmud, essentially. And everything that we do is based on the Talmud, which is in turn based on the Mishnah, which is in turn based on the Bible. So ultimately, human life trumps everything. So, for instance, on the Sabbath, I'm not allowed to drive a car or go in a car, but if somebody's ill and needs to go to hospital, you can go in the car because human life trumps everything. The sanctity of human life trumps everything that's in the Bible except for three things. So if a person puts a gun to your head and says, I want you to commit adultery or I'm going to kill you, then scripturally you have to sacrifice yourself not to commit adultery. If somebody holds a gun to your head and says, kill that person, you have to allow yourself to be killed rather than kill another person. And the other one is idolatry. So so that's those three things you're supposed to sacrifice your life for. Idolatry nowadays is perhaps, I don't know if that would classify nowadays, because idolatry nowadays is perhaps different to what it was back in the day. You don't have the type of idolatry where you have the types of sacrifices, human sacrifices, and all manner of weird kind of idolatry. So I don't know whether that applies or to what extent it applies nowadays. But certainly idolatry is one of those three things which you are required to sacrifice your life. But then pretty much everything else is you have to follow guidance. So idolatry nowadays is your phone, sport, celebrities, and all of that. So that obviously is not what we're talking about. don't get much of people worshipping a stone idol or a piece of material or something. You know, that's not okay. I don't know much about Buddhism, but I don't know if it's the actual Buddha that they're worshipping or the idea behind it, the spirituality behind it. I don't know. But generally speaking, nowadays, idolatry is probably not that kind of idolatry that's been spoken about. They justify being a soldier because yeah, so those three would be the inexcusable sins. I'm sure there are others as well, but those three are the main ones that we're taught. How do you justify being a soldier? Because that's to protect the lives of the people in the country. Throughout the history, yeah, so because it's a country, so they have to protect their borders. Hey, Adam. There is a concept of an army throughout the Bible, so there's no issue with having an army. Yep, scripturally there are condoned wars. I mean, not now, but when the Hebrew nation was conquering Israel, or those wars were obligatory. And we have also a tradition that we have to, throughout the ages, there's a constant war with Amalek, which is essentially, I mean, I can't really talk to that because I don't know enough about it, to be honest. But again, it comes back to our original topic of good against evil, essentially. Yeah, I think you're right, Phil. We make judgment calls all the time. All of our choices are judgment calls. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Adam. mean, the concept of capital punishment is certainly in the Bible. But throughout the ages, if a Jewish court in Israel, back in the time when the temple was there, there's very, very few instances where a Jewish court, a Beth Din, would use the death penalty. And traditionally, any Beth Din which issued the death penalty more than once in 70 years was considered a murderous Beth Din, a murderous court. So the concept of that is there, but I would say more as a deterrent rather than an actual thing, because if you study the Talmud, the depth of scrutiny in a capital case was so severe that it was very, very rare for a death penalty ever to happen, if ever at all, simply because there was always a reason to weaken an argument, or the level of proof was so high, like I say, that if a court issued a death penalty more than once in 70 years, it was considered a murderous court. Is there a difference between judging someone and making judgment calls? I guess, yeah, sure. I mean, there are different scenarios. Judging somebody is judging another person. Making a judgment call on the way you run your life, those happen all the time. They don't always call on you to judge another person. When you decide on the way you run your life, the things that you do, you're making judgment calls, I guess. I guess it's just a practical difference. Excuse me just for a second, folks. I need to go and meet the Queen. Well, actually the King on this occasion. Look at that. That's what I call good cigar. Still stays alight after a few minutes. What did I miss? That's not good, Adam. You want my input on what, Phil? I'm just having something to eat to stave off a nicotine crash. Well, if that gets opened by customs, that won't help you, I don't think. Because that's a standard thing in America. When they see cigars without labels, automatically assume they're Cubans. And those will get destroyed by a very happy customs officer. You are allowed Cubans? There's a famous story about an insurance claim. I've mentioned this before. There's a famous story about a guy who had a cigar collection, smoked them all, and then made an insurance claim for his cigars because they got destroyed by fire. He went to court and he won. He won the claim, but then he got arrested for destruction of property, willful destruction of property. Apparently it's a true story, but I don't know. Once again, I'll just be curious your thoughts. On which point? I'm going to go back to Knife Maker saying I kind of took it as being judgmental towards other folk, but that may not be the correct context of the scripture. Basically, we're commanded to live our lives in accordance with scripture. That forces judgment, discernment. Tolerance and acceptance are not the same. No, they're very much not the same. A little higher up. Is there a difference in judging someone and making judgment calls? Is that the one? The difference in being dispassionate. So for me, is what I said earlier on. The basic difference between being judgmental and making judgment calls, for me, is that when you're making a judgment call, is that you're, in the way you lead your life, the decisions that you make, the choices that you take, are judgment calls. Being judgmental is judging somebody by the judgment calls that another person makes. So that's how I see it. So we each have our own way that we make a judgment call. In other words, the choices that we take, we each have our own flavor. We each have our own way that we do it. But if I don't like the way somebody else does his choices, makes his choices, and I'm judgmental about that, that is obviously intolerance. So we each are entitled to make our own judgment calls, as long as they're not illegal and as long as they're not discriminatory. So we each are entitled to lead our own lives based on whether it's a faith or the morals that you want to uphold. But if I judge somebody else for the way he does it, that I think is wrong. And essentially, that's where a lot of evangelism comes from. I don't have a problem really with people being evangelical and to guide people to have more faith or to just have better morals, for instance, even if it's not religious based. But once it gets past that point and it's like, you must do it my way, that's where the problems start, in my opinion. Have a look through my gallery, Adam, and see if it's on there. Oh, you're talking about the one that John's got. All bright. Is it all bright up, John? That's the one with the flamey thing on the shank. You talking about that one? That's the one that John won in my giveaway. If you head over to All Bride Up, you'll see it on his channel, if that's the one you're talking about. It's all down to tolerance, really and truly. It's all down to tolerance because we're all so tied up in our own way of life. All right, Phil. Have a good one. A square shank. I don't recall. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for joining in. Interesting conversation tonight. I think you're talking about this, maybe. Kind of a bulldog. 715, yeah, I'm looking at it now. That was a kind of a take on a bulldog, because it's got a diamond shank, and it's got the rings on the rim. So it's kind of a Dublin bulldog-esque kind of pipe. I got actually quite a bit of criticism on that pipe for calling it a bulldog. Some of the purists out there weren't happy with it, but you know, if nothing else, artisan pipe makers, that's what they're all about, is doing their take on classical shapes. Just below it I can see pipe 702, which is a super grain pipe. I haven't done one for a while. It would be nice to. I don't do straight grain that much these days. It's more cross grain that I do most of the time. But it would be nice. I have got a couple of fresh loads of briar which I haven't really sorted through. I think I might try and find something that will make a super grain pipe. Yeah, Troy, you can buy perfectly good pipes for 40-50 quid. A good example is a Rossi pipe. Those are basically Savinelli's. But I suppose making a pipe is the experience of making a pipe, and having a pipe that you made yourself. It's not so much the cost. Alright, Tree, sleep well. Will we see you tomorrow, Tree? You built a shed. Good for you. Well, I hope you're feeling up to it. Have a good night. Sleep well. Well, I think this is as good a point as any to call it a day. We've been on for nearly 2.5 hours, so time has flown. Oh, absolutely, Adam. Good night, Chad. Good night, Tree. Good night, Adam. Good night, Troy. Knife maker. Phil, who's gone. Who else? Andrew Sirigliano. Bluefin Piper. B-Dog, I think he's gone as well. So everybody, thank you very, very much. Sam, thank you. Yeah, it was a lovely conversation tonight. Thank you for all being part of it. Thank you, Chip. Wish you all well. Have a wonderful weekend. Jeffrey, good night. I will wish you all well, and I will catch you on the next one.